If the charges against him are true, Umar Farouk Abdul Muttalib expected to be dead today, with a whole lot of people joining him. Instead, any second now, he'll face a federal judge in Detroit on charges of plotting to blow up an airliner and murder his 289 fellow passengers and crew. Cameras are not allowed in federal court, but we expect to get details from Abdul Muttalib's arraignment momentarily. Outside the courthouse, rallying Michigan Muslims want the world to know that they stand for peace and they are against terror. Abdul Muttalib's six-count federal indictment carries a maximum sentence of life in prison, but indictment doesn't mean conviction. And some think that terror suspects have no place in civilian court at all. I'm joined by CNN senior legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin, and from D.C., terrorism analyst and CIA veteran Larry Johnson. Let me ask you, Larry, would you rather see this guy tried in a military tribunal versus a civilian court?
It doesn't matter. As long as he's tried. I think the problem we've had with what the Bush administration, previous administration, didn't do is they just took these people in and did not give them any kind of judicial process. They're going to hold them indefinitely. So that's what the Soviets used to do when they would take people, declare them enemies of the state, and say, we're going to hold you until we decide to release you. The guy's in legal custody. Our legal system's been very robust. And this was the policy of Ronald Reagan. This was the policy of George Herbert Walker Bush. It was a policy continued by Bill Clinton. So I'm very comfortable with prosecuting terrorists because it worked under Reagan, it worked under Bush Sr., and it worked under Clinton.
Did it work, prosecuting tourists or terrorists under those presidents?
It did. And it worked under just a few years ago with almost the identical crime. What I find so peculiar about this controversy is that the shoe bomber, Richard Reeve, it is almost exactly the same crime. Fortunately, both attempts failed. That was prosecuted in criminal court. Richard Reeve pled guilty. He's serving life without parole. There was no controversy about that at this point. Why it's suddenly controversial now, I think it owes more to the partisanship with which we live rather than the real merits of the case. This is a criminal case. That's where we belong.
Right.
Larry, are they going to be able to get any good intel out of this guy?
Absolutely. Look, the FBI, I've got a lot, even though I'm former CIA, former State Department, lots of friends in the FBI. FBI has very good investigators. They're actually the ones who know how to interrogate subjects. CIA has no experience with that. FBI has lots of experience, and they're able to get information out through a variety of techniques, all of it legal, none of it involving torture. And so I think, again, this 24-hour mythology that's been built up over this nonsense that the only way to get information is to torture people, that's written by Hollywood screenwriters who don't know what they're talking about and by people in government who have these bizarre fantasies of brutalizing people. The fact of the matter is the FBI, law enforcement, is very effective at getting information from suspects, particularly when you got the goods on them like you do on this Umar Abdul Muttalib.
And if I could just add one point,
sure.
It's not even just interrogation that is the only way you get information. Let's say, presumably, he was traveling with a cell phone. He was traveling with documents. You take that cell phone, you find out how it was used, whom he called, whose calls he got. You follow that chain where it leads. You follow the documents where they go. That's old-fashioned, good detective work, whether it's done by CIA agents or FBI agents. That's the kind of thing that could be very promising. It doesn't violate anyone's rights. It's not involving torture, and it's very effective.
Well, Larry, from your experience, do guys like this sing like a canary?
Sometimes they do. You know, when you go back and you look at the people that are in prison now who were terrorists, active terrorists, Fawaz Yunus, who was taken into custody back in like 1987, the blind sheikh, Rahman, who was implicated in trying to blow up the Lincoln and Holland tunnels. You've got Kiki Mosquera, who blew up the Avianca plane. You've got Hakim Murad and Ramzi Youssef, who are implicated in the Bojinka plot. So you've got a lot of terrorists who've been put on trial, who've given up information either in the course of the trial or prior to that. So this nonsense that somehow using our criminal laws and acting like a civilized nation makes us, you know, wimps is, I think, doing a disservice to this country, because if it was good enough for Ronald Reagan and if it was good enough for George Herbert Walker Bush, I think it ought to be good enough for us now.
Okay, I'm just getting word that the court hearing is over, and Jeffrey, a not guilty plea from Abdul Muttalib.
Well, I think it's worth noting that it's 6 minutes after 2. This was probably about a 4-minute hearing. This is a very routine matter in arraignment. a not guilty plea is entered just to let the proceedings get started.
So he didn't necessarily insist on a not guilty plea.
Oh, no.
Because this is somebody who wants to be seen as a holy warrior, and I did this, and he already told investigators that he was training in Al-Qaeda, and he wanted to blow up that plane.
I anticipate that this case will end in a guilty plea, given the evidence. But certainly it wouldn't end, this soon. With a guilty plea. The lawyer has to spend some time with him. Lawyer has to investigate. She has to learn the circumstances, see if she can make a deal. All of that is going to take time. So the fact that a not guilty plea was entered is not really significant in determining whether that's how the case will really end, with a trial or a guilty plea.
What's it like to be an attorney? I know you've talked with so many about this, to have to represent a terrorist.
Well, they really believe in the system, and they really believe that the only way the system is fair for everybody is that if even bad people force the government to prove their cases, because that will mean that when the cases are closer, everyone will have the rights to use the rights guaranteed to criminal defendants. Look, it's not the work that I chose to do when I was a practicing lawyer, but I respect the people who do it, and I'm glad they're not me.
Well, I know what Larry Johnson would want to do if he was in that courtroom with that guy, that's for sure. And it would not be very diplomatic. Larry Johnson, Jeffrey Toobin, guys, thanks so much. Well, did you want to make one more comment, Larry?
I'd say I'd read him his rights, but if he ends up spending a long time in jail or a death sentence, I would lose no sleep over it and say he finally may have got his wish.
Got it.
He's not eligible for a death sentence, because fortunately no one died. Life in prison, count on it.
Got it. All right. Well, we'll of course be tracking it, and we'll have you both on many times more from now. Jeffrey Toobin, Larry Johnson, thanks, guys.